Every shift, there's a moment when the noise fades. The patient's gone, the paperwork's done, and it's just you, the road, and everything you're still thinking about. This is when the real conversations start. The ones about calls that didn't sit right. The things we do because that's how we were taught. And the quiet question nobody says out loud. Are we actually doing the best we can? EMS is built on tradition, but medicine keeps moving, whether we move with it or not. This show is about closing that gap between old habits and new evidence, between doing things right and doing things because we always have. No hype, no hero talk, just honest conversations about pre-hospital medicine, the same ones we have in the truck, in the station, and on the drive back when the sirens are off. This is the ToneDrop Podcast. Welcome back to the ToneDrop Podcast. Before we go any further into our episode today, I'm going to slow this down for a second. This episode talks about death, grief, emotional exhaustion, and the mental toll of first responder work, including scenes involving families and children. There's nothing graphic, nothing sensational, but it is heavy. So if today already feels like too much, it's okay to pause this and come back later. This job teaches us to push through. This episode doesn't need that. There are many things about this job that you eventually realize you're never going to explain well. Not because people don't care, not because they wouldn't listen, but because the experience itself doesn't translate into normal language. You can tell people what happened, you can explain what you did, you can describe how it ended, but none of that captures what it feels like to step into someone else's life at the exact moment that it breaks. And that's what I keep coming back to, because the hardest part of this job isn't the chaos, it's the quiet. It's 3 a.m. There's something about 3 a.m. that feels exposed, not peaceful, not calm, just thin, like the world doesn't have any padding on it. That's usually when we walk into people's homes, and everything looks normal. That's the part that messes with you. The front door opens, and you step into a life that's already been lived for decades. Family photos line the walls, birthdays, graduations, weddings. You can see 40 years of marriage frozen in frames. A younger version of the man that you're about to work on is smiling back at you from a picture above the mantel. There's a couch with an indentation where he always sat, a recliner angled toward the TV, shoes by the door that will never move again. And right there, in the middle of a life, is a man on the floor. A father, a husband, a man who went to bed and never got back up. You kneel down and check for a pulse, and you don't find one. And you already know. You knew the second you touched him. You knew by the stillness that doesn't belong to sleep. You knew before anyone asked you anything. But you move anyway. You start CPR anyway. And people on the outside think that it's about hope. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's about dignity. It's about closure. Sometimes it's about protecting the people standing behind you from the question that will follow them for the rest of their lives. Did they do everything they could? Because they are watching you. His wife is standing in the doorway, holding onto the frame like it's the only thing keeping her upright. She's been married to this man for 40 years. She knows his breathing. She knows his heartbeat. And she knows something is wrong before you ever say a word. You work anyway, not because you think you're going to change the ending, but because what you're giving them in that moment isn't a miracle. It's certainty. That nothing was rushed, nothing was skipped, nothing was ignored, especially their family member. And that weight stays with you because you're holding two truths at the same time. You know how this is going to end, and you still give everything you have to the process. That tension does something to you when it happens again and again and again. Eventually, you stop feeling the adrenaline, but you never stop feeling the cost. And then you clean up, you put equipment away, you wipe down the floor, you walk back out past the same family photos you walked in by. Sometimes, within minutes, you're back in service. And there's another part of the call nobody ever sees. It's the drive back. The siren's off, the radio's quiet, nobody says anything. You and your partner are just staring forward, both pretending you're fine. And that silence feels heavier than the call itself. That's when your brain starts replaying things you didn't even notice in the moment. The way the house smelled, the way the wife was standing in the doorway. You don't talk about it, not because you don't trust your partner, but because you both already know. And you don't even realize how tight you're gripping the steering wheel until your hands start to hurt. That drive follows you home more than the call ever does. That's the part people don't understand about the morning after. You go home after a night like that, after death, adrenaline, and silence. And the world just keeps moving. Coffee gets made, kids get ready for school, someone complains about traffic. And you're standing there thinking, am I the only one who feels like something just broke? But you don't say that. You say, it was busy. Because saying anything else feels like opening a door you don't have the strength to walk through. There are parts of calls I've never told anyone. Not because they're graphic, not because they're shocking, but because I don't want to hand that weight to someone else. There's a difference between sharing and unloading. And a lot of us learn that line the hard way. I don't want my family to carry images they didn't sign up for. I don't want my partner to feel what I felt in that moment. So instead, I edit. I give the clean version, the safe version, the version that lets everyone else sleep. And that protection comes from love. But over time, it creates isolation. Because if nobody ever hears the real version, eventually you start carrying it alone. That's where the fatigue starts. Not muscle tired, not sleep deprived. The kind of tired that settles into who you are. You start feeling out of sync with the world, like you're living on a different timeline, like you've seen behind a curtain most people never even know exists. So you stop explaining, you stop sharing details, and slowly, quietly, distance forms. Distance from conversations that feel too light. Distance from people who mean well, but don't really get it. Distance from parts of yourself you don't recognize anymore. That's where burnout actually begins. Not when you collapse, but when you separate. Then there are the calls that get personal. The ones where your brain betrays you. You're functioning, you're moving, and somewhere in the background your thoughts are whispering, what if this was my sister? What if this was my dad? You don't freeze, you don't stop working, you compartmentalize. But those thoughts matter. They don't mean you're unprofessional, they mean your empathy still works. The danger isn't having those thoughts. The danger is when they start happening constantly, or when they stop happening entirely. Both are warning signs. One means overload, the other means shutdown. Neither makes you weak, they mean you're human. And most of us were never taught how to read those signals. We were taught to push through. Add to that the way we're treated. The yelling, the insults, the disrespect, and sometimes physical violence. Sometimes it's the quieter things, being dismissed, belittled, and told that what we do doesn't really matter. That hits differently when you're already empty, when you haven't slept, you haven't eaten, and you're carrying unresolved calls from earlier in the shift. And yet you're expected to reset instantly, to show empathy on demand, to be calm, to be professional. That emotional labor is invisible. And because it's invisible, it rarely gets recovered from. Some of the calls that stick the most don't look bad on paper. They're the routine ones, the ones with normal vitals, the ones you can chart in 5 minutes. Nothing dramatic happened, nobody coded, nobody screamed, and yet it stays with you. Because trauma isn't always about what happened. Sometimes it's about what almost happened, or what it reminded you of, or the moment you realized how fragile everything else actually is. Those are the calls people don't understand when you say you're tired, because they're looking for drama, and what actually wears you down is accumulation. Burnout doesn't show up as one big moment, it erodes you. There was a moment when I realized this job had changed me, not in a big, obvious way. It was small. I noticed I didn't react to things the same way anymore. Loud noises hit different. Sleep felt heavier. Patience ran shorter. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was that my nervous system was tired of being surprised. And that realization hits hard because it's not something you chose. It just happened. That's when you understand that this job doesn't always change you loudly. Sometimes it changes you quietly and permanently. It looks like irritability, cynicism, detachment, feeling numb instead of tired. And the culture rewards endurance. You're tough. You can handle it. You always show up. But nobody asks what you're handling past. Then there are the moments with no words. A child tugging your shirt and looking up at you with tears in their eyes, asking if mommy is okay. And you're kneeling there, eye level with them, knowing there's no right answer, knowing that whatever you say will live in their memory forever. There's no protocol for that, no training slide. You just try to be human without breaking. And you do that again and again and again until one day you realize you're tired in a way that isn't physical. If I could sit next to a brand new EMT at 3 a.m. after their first bad call, I wouldn't give them advice. I'd tell them this. If this affected you, that's not weakness. If you're tired already, that doesn't mean you're not cut out for this. Fatigue in this job doesn't just show up all at once. It accumulates quietly. And the earlier you learn to pay attention to that, the longer you'll last. Don't wait until you're broken to ask for help. Don't confuse numbness with strength. And don't think you're alone just because everyone else looks fine. They're not. There's a conversation that needs to be had more honestly in EMS. Not just about surviving this job, but lasting in it. Longevity doesn't mean staying forever. It means not losing yourself if you do stay. Recovery doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's sleeping without guilt. Sometimes it's saying no to one more shift. Sometimes it's letting your nervous system come down instead of staying on alert. Sometimes it's admitting quietly that you've been tired for a long time. That doesn't mean you're weak. It means your nervous system has been doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect you. But protection isn't the same thing as healing. Healing takes intention, and it doesn't happen all at once. It just has to start. This episode is titled, "The Things I Wish You Could Understand." And I want to be really clear about what that means. We don't want the people we love to understand this job the way that we do. We don't want them to see what we've seen. We don't want them to carry the images, the sounds, or the weight that comes home with us after a shift. We don't want them to understand the trauma. What we want is understanding of the emotion. Understanding when we're quiet. Understanding when we're distant. Understanding when we're exhausted in ways that don't make sense. We want grace, not exposure. Empathy, not shared burden. I don't need people to fully understand this job, but I wish they understood that it changes you. Quietly, gradually, sometimes permanently. Taking care of ourselves isn't separate from taking care of our patients. It's the only way that this works. If this episode felt heavy, that's okay. If it sounded familiar, just know you're not alone. And if it helped put words to something that you've been carrying quietly, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. I'm James Flynn, and this is the ToneDrop Podcast.